I am working remotely. I've been with Microsoft just under 2 years now.
Oh, okay.
Before that, I was working in the governor's
Well, we're
office.
waiting on another
Gotcha.
panelist, but we'll get started, and Maria Adelina can jump in at any point. It is my distinct privilege to welcome you to the Brockport History Alumni Career Panel. We're really blessed to have returning students who have gone out and accumulated experience and wisdom, especially experience and wisdom that your professors don't have, having never gone out into the career world. And in some ways, what you have is future you here. So whether you're a freshman and see moves and things you should do while you're a history major to benefit your career later, whether you're graduating as a senior or whether you're a recent graduate, there's definitely going to be information that's very helpful to you coming from these wonderful panelists. So we thank them so much for coming, and I've always found when I've done this, it's silly for me to introduce them because they're here and articulate and can introduce themselves. So we'll go from left to right and start. Melissa, both introduce yourself and then tell them what you do, just not your job, but what you actually do.
Okay. So my name's Melissa Kubiak. I graduated in 2004. I am currently an attorney, and I do appellate work, which means I don't have to be in the courtroom at all. I don't have to interface with clients at all. I just sit home in my living room at my computer, and I write briefs, and I do legal research. So yeah, that's what I do right now. But prior to going to law school, I worked at Nixon Peabody as a legal secretary because when I was at Brockport, I thought I wanted to go to law school, and then I got cold feet. So I ended up doing a couple different things over the years. And I was also an account manager at Amica Insurance. So insurance is always something available to you. All these sexy careers. But anyways, yeah, I finally jumped in and went to law school. And yeah, so I'm a stay-at-home lawyer.
I'm Doug Priest. I'm currently working as, my title is Business Program Manager, which doesn't really tell you much, at Microsoft. I do strategic work there in their worldwide public sector business, so it's about charting sort of the 1 to 5 year trajectory for the business when it comes to public sector customers. So we work with governments, with universities, so forth. And prior to joining Microsoft, I was with the governor's office in New York State. And before joining up there, I had a small academic career of my own. I went all the way through, did my doctorate in history finished up at Michigan State University in 2016, graduated from here in 2007. I'm afraid that dates me a little bit at this point. But I've taken sort of this tech experience that I had going way back to when I started as a computer science major before switching to history, and have sort of taken just that little bit of subject matter expert, combined it with the synthesis and research and analysis skills that I learned in history, and have charted a career in tech business now. So that's where I am, and looking forward to talking a little bit more about it as we go.
All right, and my name's Sebastian Piedmont. I graduated from Brockport in 2016, and I'm the managing partner at Tully Rinke PLLC's Syracuse office. So I'm an attorney. I do get to work at home sometimes, but not all the time. I do have to, manage an office, but I will say that was not the trajectory that I had ever thought I would be on. I did originally go to University of Buffalo my freshman year of college to be an attorney. Woke up one day, decided I wanted to be a teacher, so I transferred to Brockport, got into the teaching program, did the history program here, had Professor Daly for a couple classes. I'll get more into those later, I guess. But no, I mean, and now I'm doing a lot of, I decided to take the LSAT even though I was in the teaching program, student taught and everything, scored well enough to get into Syracuse, went there, wound up with some great internships around here too. I did summer internships at the Orleans County District Attorney's Office. It's like half an hour from here, in Albion, New York. And then I worked at Madison County Attorneys, which is out by east of Syracuse, and then wound up at a firm, did municipal work, and now I'm doing federal labor and employment and New York State labor and employment, and surprisingly a lot of education stuff, which I guess the teaching background worked well with. But yeah, I mean, being a managing partner was not where I thought I would be when I was here in 2016. So I can tell you one thing, that your kind of path can very quickly change. But that's where I'm at right now.
Yes, apparently history helps you be flexible. So there's a lot of,
It does.
flexibility there. And Doug, just we'll have a chance for questions from the audience at the end. But do you ever work from home? Because that's so new.
I do. My main work site is from home. I feel a little underdressed up here compared to my colleagues, but this is what I wore to work. So I wore it here as an example.
Yeah, this is the first time I've worn a suit coat in a year, so.
And I only wear ties when I'm on with EEOC judges, but that's also all remote. And we do it all on like Zoom calls. So
You're in
like,
sweatpants and a tie.
no, I mean I might be at the office. I mean I occasionally wear these khakis or jeans, but yeah, that's where I'm at though with dressing up for work. This is definitely above my normal.
Yeah, and I taught all four of the panelists, and they know, all of you know, I always wear suits. So this is, you were dressed more appropriately than I am. I have to do this. So we'll go in the other order and start with Sebastian. But how did your Brockport history degree prepare you for your career, and also kind of what you did in Brockport history?
How it prepared me. Again, I think flexibility is definitely one thing. It definitely. I think the interesting thing about the history degree at Brockport is the way that you can kind of get so many different classes, and maybe it's just because we were all in the history program, but I mean, I took like the Reconstruction class, I took political assassinations, I had Asian history, I had Middle East history, I had, some of the more classical, like 18th century American history. I mean, all of that's so different, but it still falls under the same umbrella. But what it really did prepare me for was, being able to look at documents analytically and kind of remove myself, just because what I think is right or wrong or what's good or bad. I think sometimes it's better to look at a book or an assignment and be able to kind of analyze it, taking that step back and being able to kind of put yourself in the role of the person who's there at the time, especially with that political assassinations and really the Reconstruction class, not to talk up Dr. Daly just because he's sitting there. But I mean, really, that's what those classes were. And it really prepared me for law school, because almost all the history classes were the Socratic method of, going around discussions. And I mean, really, that's what law school was. And now, I mean, with the types of clients you deal with, especially federal employees in my line of work, you're dealing with people who maybe you totally have nothing in common with, but you need to be able to take that step back and advocate for them. And it's the same too with, I recently got roped into a criminal defense case, and I've never done that. I got to bring the guy in next week, but that'll be interesting. But it's stuff like that that's really different. So I think that's how it really got me prepared for law school, and probably doing well on the LSAT, doing well in law school, and now being at a firm, and my second firm, and being a managing partner, especially at a younger age. So I mean, really, a lot of it, too, is just being able to make those connections in class teaches you how to talk to people in the real world, I mean, it's like we had one of the societies I was in law school, we had a former head of the ACLU come speak. And after the discussion on free speech, where a professor actually argued against free speech, against the former head of the ACLU, we're at dinner with a bunch of people, and she asked me why I became an attorney, and I said, I think I'm just a dumb redneck that's good at reading books. So it can really, being able to be personable, connect with people, that's the type of thing they're going to remember. Just because you had a 4.0 or a 3.8 or a 3.9, that's not always what people remember. So I think it's important to, just be yourself and also participate in class.
That's right.
So Doug, again, what did you do at Brockport History and how did it help you in your career?
Yeah, so, I think there's 3 core skills. I'll take it more in the skills direction that I developed here first in my undergraduate education that were foundational for me, both in my academic work and in my non-academic career. Stems really from 3 things, right? Analysis, we talked about it a little bit. Learning to take a document, take any kind of artifact, understand what it means, think about what it means, and then sort of make a statement about it, make a recommendation. In my job, it turns into a recommendation, right? And then that stems right from all of your history classes, right? Whether it's a research-intensive class or just sort of a regular class. I'm sure Dr. Daly remembers me coming to his office hours all too many times to get feedback on the research papers. But the analysis piece is something I use every single day, and it's helped along by the second piece, which is, I think, synthesis. So being able to take not just one thing, but a whole bunch of things that are probably pretty disparate, that most people might not see the connections between, and being able to say, hey, this project someone's working on over here, and this project someone's working on over here, there is actually a connection here, and we need to be thinking about it differently, is an important skill. And as history majors, you're all probably used to hearing that kind of talk in your classes. You may take it for granted that you are getting good at it, but don't. It's a skill a lot of people don't have, and it's really important professionally. Then I think the last one, you mentioned this a little bit too, in terms of understanding people who are different from you, Sebastian, is empathy, right? So to be a good historian, you have to be very empathetic. You have to understand different perspectives. You have to find a way to connect with people who may have lived well before your time, and understanding that perspective is crucially important in my work. So I think those 3 things really, I started to learn them as an undergraduate. I got a ton of practice as an undergraduate, and I've continued to build them over the years. They're definitely the foundation of why I've been able to succeed in my career so far.
I have very little to add to that. They both nailed it. I mean, empathy. Analysis, yes. Taking source material and distilling it and figuring out how to apply it to what you want to apply it to. Those are just base skills that you're growing here, and I use every single day without even realizing. It's just like ingrained in my brain now, the way that my mind works. And to Sebastian's point, being open-minded, how many people in here have any interest in law? Anybody? Okay, a couple. So you have to be open-minded, because you never know who your client is walking through the door, and they could be against everything in your body. But if it's your job to defend them or just represent them in whatever way, you kind of have to see things from their point of view. And you might get a case that, even if you agree with this person, you might get a case that the majority of the law is against your position, but you need to figure out a way to convince someone else that they need to see it from a different perspective, your client's perspective. And I think that going through all of these history classes and learning all of these different perspectives is so important, and not being closed-minded, being open-minded, and just empathy.
So I'm going to ask, I hope everyone notices that people don't usually think of history as marketable skills, but that's really talking about skills that are out there. Mm-hmm. But something that touches on, something I think students think about, and we're thinking a lot about in the history department as well, which is how do we connect the history department and get you ready to go out in the job world a little bit better. So starting with Melissa, what did you have to do to achieve your career success and market your skills? And is there steps you think the history department took, or more steps you think we could take to help students with that?
I had to find myself. It took me a long time to find myself, and I came into history just because it was something I was just always interested in. Growing up, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Genesee Country Museum, but I lived right down the road from there, and I spent my summers in like their. Do you have a question?
Is that the place that had all those, real old buildings?
Yes.
The one with the
The Octagon House?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was there when I was real young.
Yep.
My school did this one carnival-based thing. And
Yep.
ended up
Yeah,
going
they
on
do a
it.
lot of like local field trips and stuff there. And I just loved it. And so I was lost, after high school. I didn't do great in high school. I wasn't really that interested in homework. And so I kind of just came to the history department figuring that it was something that I was interested in. Let's see what I can pick up while I'm here. And everyone kept asking me, oh, are you going to be a teacher? How many of you here get that question? Yeah, it's like, oh, you're in history, oh, you're going to be a teacher. No, I'm not going to be a teacher. I didn't think I was going to be a teacher, but I didn't know what I was going to do. So I had an idea that I was going to get into law, and I eventually got there, but the reading, the writing, the research are all skills that are super important for law school. And there are a lot of history majors that wind up in law school, and they took history specifically for law school. But those are skills that you can use in any, you should be able to use them in any profession. So back to the question, I've kind of meandered around.
What extra things do you have to do? How did the history department actually help with marketing yourself and helping your career? And what could we do? What do we do, and what could we do to connect people to careers better?
Well, it was a long time ago.
I remember writing letters.
Yes, well, that was more recently. I don't know if I came to you, no, I think you wrote a letter for, so, it's a fun little aside. 2 years out of undergrad, I traveled down to Savannah, Georgia, because I had read the book, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. I don't know if anyone's read that. It's a wonderful book. It really brings the city alive. And I found that they had an architectural history and museum study program that I found really fascinating. So I applied there, Savannah College of Art and Design, and went down and had a great 2 semesters. And I think Dr. Daly probably wrote a letter recommending me for that. And once I realized, though, when I was down there, that there were so few of those jobs across the country, and I'm really kind of a come back home kind of girl. I didn't want to be stuck in, like Seattle, let's say, and that was where I was going to have to stay to have a successful career, and not have the option of coming home. So I kind of abandoned that idea. But it was really, really interesting, and it was really wonderful. And then he also wrote a letter for law school, I believe, but more recently. So yeah, that was very helpful. But I don't know how much pre-law stuff was available here at the time, and how much I would have taken advantage of it. I don't know that I did, if it was available.
So Doug, sort of also, what did you do to market yourself, and what did history do, and what could we do better maybe?
Yeah. So I think when I left history, which came a little bit later for me, right? I stayed in history for a little while after undergrad. What allowed me to succeed and market myself was, really my writing ability at first. I think that made me stand out as a job applicant. It made me stand out in a few of my initial jobs. And then I think, while I was here, I also had a fellowship or a scholarship that I was sort of helping manage the school website. Not the whole school website, the department website. And I was also TAing. And that, just that little bit, right, of managing a website. This is 2007 or whatever, so managing a website a little bit different in 2007 than it is now. Nevertheless, the point is like that little bit of experience helped me get my foot in the door at my next thing, which was at a not-for-profit where I was doing some web-related work while I was doing my graduate history work, and sort of laddered that up alongside while I was doing history work. So I think providing students with those kinds of opportunities where they can continue to, have projects or some kind of work product that they can point to and say, in addition to all these skills, I've produced X, Y, or Z, is really helpful for, helping a hiring manager or whoever understand the connection between this person who's coming in with an interesting degree and interesting skills, and they carry themselves well, and their practical need to hire someone who they know can get the work done. And I think that tends to be the challenge, right, with history is people are like, okay, you can write papers, what else can you do? And so when there's in classes or through extracurriculars, however it might be, I was lucky to have those opportunities. I'm not sure everyone did, to be honest, but the more that those kinds of products, like work products, can be built into classes, and then they become kind of part of your portfolio, right? Part of something that you can point to an employer and say, I produced this, I managed this project, even if it was just like you and 2 other students, right? Those kind of small things get you your foot in the door in the first place. And then once you have your foot in the door, all the skills I talked about in my last answer are going to let you advance pretty rapidly. So I say, that was an opportunity I had, and the more that we can provide students with those kind of opportunities that help them demonstrate their ability to do that kind of work to employers, the better off they'll be.
So Sebastian, you talked a little bit about this already, but do you have anything to add about what happened in the history department, help you market yourself and get a job?
Yeah,
what
and
we might do?
I will say that I still remember it vividly. I forgot which class. I think it might have been the Reconstruction. I remember we were in one of the big theater room classes, and you gave this monologue the first day of class, and we're really going off. And I still remember it vividly about the people you went to school with. And when I got into law school at Syracuse, that was the first thing I thought of, because it all kind of seemed very similar. Maybe it's just the people I went to school with, but it kind of that's a little bit something more. Maybe you guys can talk to Dr. Daly about, or take one of his classes. But on top of that too, there's really 2 sides here, and I think we typically focus when this question gets asked, what your professors did for you or what the department did for you, and it's almost outside of the actual classroom itself. And of course, they write us letters, and I know I had people write me letters for the department for getting into law school, and kind of just teaching you how to everything we've talked about, analyzing, communicating and all that. But I do think that, at least for me, looking at what we actually were assigned, you never really think about it beyond that's classwork. But if you actually think about what you read and these people that you're learning about, these, fascinating historical characters, right? I mean, it's what really is a history major. That's probably why you picked history, was you're like, oh, I liked learning about person X, person Y. It was cool. I always liked General Sherman. I thought General Sherman was just the, whole, blazed earth, just, sometimes you got to do that to win things. And other times, you need to be a little bit more empathetic and, and kind of know your surroundings. And I think that when you look at those readings that you do, you should be picking up something more than just the history from it. You should be picking up the lessons from what those people actually did that got them to be successful, because a lot of them were no different than any of us in this room. I mean, of course, there's, the Kennedys, the Bushes, those people where they're from those families where they're going to be successful, almost without a doubt. But then you have the other people that, kind of came up from nowhere that became successful, and how they did that, I think, is important. And kind of knowing, what I learned from history was where to push the line and where not to cross it, occasionally, you don't need to be, especially in law, you always think, you have to be this prim, proper attorney, like I should be in a suit right now and not telling you anything like, oh, besides just read your books and go to law school. But really what I learned was, kind of like, maybe it's like Theodore Roosevelt, stuff like that. I still remember back learning about him, and it's like there was always these intricate things they were up to kind of behind the scenes that allowed them to be successful in, kind of changing the dynamics of what was formal, what was accepted, and kind of picking up on that. And, there's a reason we learn about these events and people. It's not just to write an essay on it. It's because they have something to teach us that's valuable to both ourselves and, society as a whole, and really to marketing yourself. And if you pick up on the right things, I think that that's the type of stuff that sets, your resume apart when you have the interview, is knowing how to communicate with people and knowing what to say in the interview that might, 99% of the people might never have the guts to say or, bring up. But I mean, I still have on my resume and have forever, right at the bottom, is still like, likes to watch Buffalo and Rochester sports, plays in local bands, like stuff like that. Like every interview I've ever had, and this isn't, I don't know if this is wood, knock on wood, but I'm not interviewing now. But I mean, I've gotten the job for every interview I've had, and every interview I had, there was a 15 to 20 minute conversation about that last part of the resume. And it's, a lot of people don't put that. And I mean, I've seen resumes and I've done interviews now, and I try to bring it up, and people are really rigid. And that's why I brought up even at the beginning was the participate in class. Put yourself out there. Like I didn't, and that's my biggest regret from Brockport, was not participating more in class, because I think back all the time and I'm like, I wish I would have brought up this point. It's interesting, and I think though that it's hard to explain, but I like, there's a reason we do the readings. It's not just to write a paper on it.
Yeah, no, and people forget that history itself is a unique form of knowledge. It has lessons in it. And the writing, I think even in the age of Chat GPT, we can write better than the AI. And writing, I say the two things to learn. One of the monologues I go off with is learn a foreign language and learn to write. And you think, oh, computers are ruining that, but they're not really. It's more important than ever in some ways. So some of you've answered some of the last questions. I'll save my last question, but I want to open it up to questions from the audience, because that's often the most valuable thing before we do the last question. So any question for all or any panelist, definitely welcome. Sure, Sean, go ahead.
Okay, this is more of a general question for everyone, but how long do you feel like it really took you before you really found your footing when it came to leaving college and just getting into the real world, into real life? Because that's something I'm kind of worried about as a senior. I really don't know what I can do with my major, and I'm just afraid.
Melissa's given a good answer to that already. So.
It's yeah. So I was doing internships while in school, so I had a job that I could go to when I graduated. It wasn't something that I wanted to do for a career, for long term, but it's okay to do things knowing that it's short term.
I just wanted to know, like, how long were you at that job for?
I was there for like a year and a half before I found the Savannah thing. Then I was at Savannah for 2 semesters, came back up here, then got the job at Amica. Then I was a server for like a year, still trying to figure stuff out, trying to find something that I really liked and that I connected with. Got the job with Amica, was there for 4 years, I think, and still just wanted more. I always wanted more, and I think I've moored it out with law school and being an attorney. I've got everything on my plate that I want right now. So, but it's, you're never going to, I don't know that anyone at any point in their life feels that they are right where they should be, always wanted to be, and they want nothing more. Like, don't be afraid that you don't know exactly where you want to be tomorrow or a year from now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've had a number of different jobs now, and probably 2 years before any of those jobs, I wouldn't have been able to predict where I was at 2 years later. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity to figure things out. I think, in terms of how long it took, probably a couple of years in terms of sort of figuring it out. But I think one of the things you can ask yourself is, what is it about history that you like? What about doing history that you like? Is it writing? Is it research? Is it being in the classroom? Is it collaborating with your classmates? I think that's a really important question that you and frankly everyone in the room needs to ask themselves. And it took me a long time to be able to divorce the actual doing of history from the subject matter that I was studying and figuring out what about it that I liked. So, I really like working with students, and so I still try to mentor folks in my current job, and I still insert myself into training opportunities when I can do that kind of thing. I like research and analysis, so I've continued to try to do those kinds of things. Completely different context than when I was doing them in the context of history. And there were also things that I didn't like after I was out in non-academic world for a little while, I realized that I really like working on teams. And a lot of my academic work and a lot of, history work is kind of solo, right? It's a little monastic in some cases. So that's something that I learned about myself after I finished doing history. And now I work on a team that, has people all over the world, and I get to talk to them every day, and that's really exciting to me. So I had to, it took me time to figure that out. I certainly didn't know it the day I graduated. And I couldn't necessarily say for sure exactly where I'll be 5 years from now. And, at this point in my career, I'm lucky enough to say that I'm comfortable in that uncertainty, but it took me a while to get to that point.
Yeah, and, I think, just going off of their responses, is that really, I mean, the best thing you can do is try out whatever you can while you're in school. And because it's a lot less stressful to try things when you're in school, and maybe don't have as many bills to pay. But I would say that for me, thankfully I did student teach, and that was kind of like my real first foray into the real world of working 50 hours a week, and it was unpaid, being a teacher. My smartboard actually broke the first day I was there and didn't get repaired until the last week of my student teaching. So I still remember drawing the entire World War II map, and my teacher kept it up on the board for a week. And then I did the same thing with Vietnam, Cuban Missile Crisis, everything you can think of. But what it is that think of what you like. And if you can find a job that does that, that's awesome. I mean, there's also, work's still work. I mean, if you don't come home kind of miserable every once in a while, are you really
doing
working?
it right?
Yeah, if you don't come home, kind of opening the door and swearing, are you really working?
If you work from home, you can just be miserable there.
Yeah, that's true. And then you don't have to, throw the tie off, but it's kind of you also kind of want to be able to throw it off. Kind of like when you had the flip phones and you could slam them shut. Yeah. We lost that. Thankfully, our phones, I still have a phone in my office with the actual phone that I can slam. But, no, I the thing is don't put the pressure on yourself, because when you start doing that, you might, look at yourself in 30 years and be like, I just went into this because I didn't know what to do. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you got to live, you got to make money, you got to, we live in the United States, it's 2023, you got to have a job, you got to do things. But what I would say is that instead of asking as much how am I, when do you have that aha moment, is what we called it, at least in law school. I don't know if that's what we still call it, everywhere else in other schools too. It's when you kind of have that moment of like, oh my God, I understand contracts. You know, like I actually didn't understand it until the day before the final. And that's why my grade wasn't too great in contracts. But it's like, put yourself in a situation where you can have that moment. That way you don't wind up, you know, doing something you know, they're like the reason we go to Brockport and go to college and do all these things is to try to be a little bit happier in life, right? Like, we could all just went and I guess to like the coal mines, and nothing wrong with that, but we could have and made probably better money than even I make as an attorney. So, you know, but the reason we don't do that is because we don't want to do that. And, you know, just don't pigeonhole yourself in anything, and, you know, kind of be open, but definitely, you know, test the waters. And, you know, if you got to take a year to figure it out, you know, figure it out. But I mean, I think that when I was at Syracuse, I have a certification in national security. I've never used that certificate. Like, I don't remember anything about drones that I learned about in law school. Besides the codes officers I dealt with that wanted to use them, and we had to tell them, no, you can't, because you have to register them with the FAA. So, like, you could be like a history major, and I mean, honestly, I would have never thought I'd be sitting on a panel with someone who works for Microsoft as a history major, right? Like, just try stuff out, talk to people, see what happens, and I mean, network. That's the biggest thing, because you never know when someone might be like, hey, like, I know you didn't go to law school, but we got a paralegal spot open and it bridges into Syracuse law or something. You never know when stuff like that can come up. You know, and that might, all of a sudden you might be doing some legal work and be like, holy cow, I like this. I wouldn't mind going to law school, or I wouldn't mind being a teacher. I wouldn't mind, you know, working at Microsoft, stuff like that. So.
Yeah, and I mean, perfect molding answers, and because there's two messages, which is the flexibility, and it takes time. But the other thing is do something, because I have 21 nieces and nephews that are your age, and it's like, see the difference in how they're doing. It's like, do something. I mean, after college, I worked in a gas station and rec center. After graduate school, I delivered pizzas, you know, so it's okay, but it's doing nothing. And as we've seen in the past, trying out lots of different things, that's not that bad. And leaving something you don't like, that's never bad. We have, yeah.
History is not my major, it's my minor. And I did interview at Jesse Country Museum as a historical interpreter. That is what I want to do with my life. But I was wondering if you guys had any minors and if they have influenced you to do other things, or in interview processes or even jobs. Have you ever had or been asked? Have you had any experience with that sort of thing?
I didn't have a minor, but what's your major?
Recreation and leisure studies.
Okay, all right. I did not have a minor. I was full in history. I don't even know if I took any other classes. It was just like history. I had to. I think I took dance to do like my gym credit or whatever. But yeah, so I can't speak to that. But
I mean, I guess teaching, like, I mean, I did have the adolescent education and the special education. And actually, yeah, I mean, like, you'll be asked about that at interviews. That's the first thing that they almost see, is because every single person who applies for a job typically is like history or English, or, you know, oh, you had this minor. What's that? Oh, you went, like, I still remember actually my first firm, because we were on, you know, I taught. And then that firm, Costello, Cooney, Fearon in Syracuse, along with municipal, we had one union client that I worked with, but also we did education, but it was school side. They were like, oh, you taught, like you worked at a school. I'm like, yeah, you know, I got the certification. They're like, oh, well, we represent school districts in Central New York. And I'm like, yeah, I've never taken a class in education, but I'm down to do it. I never took an employment and labor class. I'm down to do it. And maybe that's just that point of like, hey, I need a job. I'm about to graduate from law school. But I mean, that type of thing, I mean, yeah, they're going to ask you about it. And that's what sets you apart. I mean, and it's not that, like, I'm not telling you all go out and get a minor tomorrow, if that's what it sounds like. But I mean, it's those things that set you apart that are important, and they're going to talk to you about it. And, you know, being able, I think, though, to tie the two together is what's important. Because, like, I still remember, like, I took an education law class at Brockport. It was in, I forgot the name of the building, but that school next door to here. It's like the old elementary school.
Cooper.
Cooper, yeah. I had I think it was like Tuesday, Thursday, I'd go student teach and then I have to go there for classes from like 5 to like 8:30. But yeah, those are the types of things that, like, how you can tie that into, like, if, you know, the Genesee Museum, for example, like, tying everything together, like, I think that's literally the synthesis thing, like we were talking about. That's why history is kind of cool, is it teaches you how to synthesize, like, pick 3 books and tell me how, I don't know, pick a topic and make it cohesive. And for the first 2 years, I couldn't do that, but by the 3rd year, I figured it out. And, you know, now I can kind of do that to judges occasionally, and they buy it, which is cool. But, you know, fake it till you make it. But that's kind of, yeah, I mean, I think doing the minor and having that history, like being able to bring history into that other side, like that's a pretty unique thing. I mean, in this room, probably at least. I mean, I don't know, how many minors in history are there in here? One? So, I mean, you've already got everyone else beat on uniqueness with that, so.
So I mentioned earlier I had comp sci, which I didn't actually finish the minor on, but I had enough coursework and still, you know, it taught me to teach, taught me to talk to that kind of audience, which has been useful and remains useful, even though I'm not in any sense a computer engineer or anything like that. I have the ability to communicate with people who are, and that has remained useful. And then my actual minor was dance, which I did for my last 2 or 3 years here at Brockport. Performance actually was admitted both into the MA in history here and the MFA in dance here, and chose history. But I did that work. It has helped me have a connection to the arts community wherever I've been, which has been really helpful. And I know you're thinking, he works for Microsoft, what are you talking about? But it turns out that a big part of doing this kind of strategic work is being able to form relationships and make connections between things. I was just down in Austin last week for South by Southwest, the conference, and my colleague and I interviewed the founder of Mural Arts in Philadelphia, an organization that you know is responsible for some of those large, like, building murals you've probably seen photos of in Philly, and does a lot of work in the community with, you know, incarcerated people who are reintegrating back into the community, teaching them art skills and things like that. And having a background in the arts, you know, makes those connections possible for me. So that's just, you know, literally last week an example where having a background in a minor actually mattered for my job in tech today. So you never know where those are going to show up, and definitely don't hide them, or don't feel like it's not relevant, because it's surprisingly relevant.
Mm-hmm.
I maybe got time for 1 or 2 more questions. Yeah, go ahead, Clive.
I was just wondering for you two what law school is like, and like what kind of time it takes up, if you were working while you were doing it, or what?
It sucks. I subbed during my first semester of law school, and that was the most I could do. And then after that, I stopped. Like, law school is full time. It's not grad school. It's not like, I went in thinking it was undergrad, and my first week, it was not Brockport. And I love Brockport, but I went in thinking it was going to be 3 more years of college. It was 8 to 12 hours a day of class, reading textbooks, reading opinions, and then basically take like the hardest readings you've done in the history program and then do that every day for 3 years. Well, 2 years. Your 3rd year's fun, but yeah. I mean, I don't know about your experience with law school.
So I didn't go to law school till I was 30. And at that point, I was established in Rochester, and I ended up picking Buffalo because it was the closest, and I commuted every day. So that's 2 hours right there. So it is what you make of it. I did not have the same devotion and study ethics as Sebastian. I mean, it's what you make of it. And I didn't socialize a lot because I had my core group of people, and we took a lot of classes together. We were in the same section our first year, and then I went home every night and did my papers and did whatever. And I was working the first 2 years, again, as a server. I don't know if any of you are servers. I don't know how the serving world is nowadays, post-COVID, but it worked really well for me throughout all of school because it's flexible hours and it's really good money. So if you're into that, then I recommend that. But there are other opportunities too. So you're not just constantly taking loans and more and more and more loans.
That's
And
the thing is, because I work now, but
yeah, it's really expensive. It really is.
It's a scam. It's a huge, like, don't get me wrong, I love being an attorney, but like, if you can get into UB, go to UB. Like, if you're a resident of the state, like, I got waitlisted at UB, but I also got into other schools that were way higher, but wound up at Cuse because it was close. But, and first off, I want to take that back. I was not super studious. That's what
Well,
I
you
did.
made it sound like I was
that's what
12 hours a day. Oh.
No, that was because that's what I had to do to be
I guess I'm just
satisfactory of a
naturally
student.
just so smart. I didn't have
You're
to try.
just naturally good at law school. But the reason I did that was because on the weekends, a lot of times I would drive out here, see my friends, hang out here, and probably wasn't studying when I was at CNS, which I don't even think is there anymore, which sucks. Those were $1.50 well and draft Thursdays. So, but CNS is no longer there, and I think Stoneyard moved.
Stoneyard,
Yeah, it's not even at Stone.
It's not there anymore.
Yeah, what? But anyways.
Got minor knowledge, just bars, little bars.
Yeah, but anyways, no, like what with law school though, it is a like you can work turn it. Like I had like actually the serving thing. Like one of my best friends in law school, she bartended downtown. I mean, she told me if she did it, she like considered dropping out her third year of law school, but she was making 65 grand. She did the math. If she worked full time, was gonna make 65 grand bartending in downtown Syracuse. So like.
Next career panel, we're getting a bartender.
Yeah.
Yeah, but now
Without the student loans.
she's also like running basically her own firm out of like New York City and probably making 3 times that.
Probably doing good.
And one of the things that probably made her a really good bartender was all the trivia you get to know being a history major.
That's right.
Yeah.
But Glenn, I'm sending my daughter off to law school and just saw her like planning the finances, but she's already communicating with people in her section. That they have, I mean, there's some nice things like a nice cohort. They're already emailing back and forth about the fall.
Yeah, that's how it
And
was
the
for
third-
me, yeah.
Yeah, my wife said third year law school is different. The first year's gonna be a grind, but you gotta plan the financing really early on law school. There is financial aid, but it's not like college.
Yeah,
You really gotta plan.
I would treat it like your first year of law school, do law school. Second year, you can probably kind of work and do it. Like, I mean, it depends on where you go to law school too. I mean, if you're going to UB and commuting 2 hours, it's different. If you're living in Syracuse, I mean, everywhere's different. But then, like, by your 3L year, it should be kind of easier. It's like the reason I have the national security was kind of like with like all of a sudden I realized I'm like, oh, if I take one more class, I'm gonna have the basically minor in national security. But by 3L year, like you kind of are figuring out where you're gonna have a job or lining up jobs. So then it's kind of like you can do a lot of stuff. I mean, I was still like 1L year, I would drive out here all the time back home to Albion to play with like my band I was playing with. And then same 3L year, but out in Syracuse, like 4 days a week was doing that. So it really kind of, you know, also it's what you're into, you know, some people like, you know, some people treat law school like it's like you were saying, I mean, it's like a social club for some people.
It can be, yes.
Like it's like high school. Like there's cliques and then too, it's like my wills and trust professor, I mean, he just got in trouble. I don't know if you saw that at Turning Stone. So that was interesting. But yeah, the law school is different than undergrad, let's put it that way.
Excellent. Well, we have like a few minutes left. You can come up and ask the panel questions on your own, but let's thank them so much. That was just wonderful.
Well done, folks.
I was in whatever one, I remember the monologue of, I was going to school with a bunch of coke